Okay, so in 3, 2, 1. First thing, okay, several things to talk about when we talk about allowing individual workers to waive their labor rights in exchange for additional pay. First of all, we fully understand that there should happen no forcing by the companies or by the governmental companies to the workers uh, when discussing exchange of their labor rights to payment. We only allow this option to be in the contract. We only allow the workers um, to have an option of exchanging the rights, but not forcing them in any way, and not sending any message to the corporations or companies, and any like law case of the companies or corporations trying to violate the rights of the workers and their free will would be severely punished. Secondly, um, it's important to note that the motion is about individual workers rather than the groups of people, because we realized that the case of every single individual worker would be like their free will should only be spoken for, like their individual selves, rather than this happening by a group of workers. Thirdly, when if the motion is accepted, only there should be an option for the individual workers to exchange only one of their labor rights instead of a pack of them. If the company would want their workers to get additional pay for maternity leave and our limits, but the workers should have a full right to say no. I only want to sell, like for example, my maternity leave because I don't need it, but I still want to have our limits. So secondly, let's spend a little time to analyze who this motion is actually about. This motion is about the people who are struggling with their financial situation to a crucial point where they would be ready to have some additional pay in exchange for their labor rights. These are the people who probably have several jobs. These are the people who have additional hours which are not on their contracts already in status quo. These are the people who have their children and families to feed, but they don't have enough money just because they are in this uh, life circumstances where their job conditions are not enough for them um, not enough for them to be better and thrive in their finances. And this is this is most likely a huge group of people, because many people, due to their like birth lottery, them because of their gender, because of their education, because of the wealth of their parents, and for many other factors and conditions, are not just simply physically not able to get a better job or uh, get yeah or improve their financial situation. What is happening? So what's also important to understand here is that if we compare the two worlds, in one of which we allow the workers to sell their labor rights, in both of these worlds, these people are still probably not going to be able to suddenly become rich or just have a huge increase in their financial situation for them to become um, for all of them to become very uh, like very wealthy or anything like that. It's important to understand that in both of those worlds, people are probably going to be still struggling. But what happens in this on our side is that there is going to be a direct decrease of the level of their suffering, because they will be able to have this tool of having of improving their financial situation. They are going to have this additional payment of $500 or $1,000, not to suddenly become rich, but for their children to have new clothes, or for their uh, like to have something above the basic needs that they are covering or not covering right now. On the other side of the house, there are vague and abstract promises by the government, probably, which are talking about some additional payments to those people, some social support to those people, which is something the governments are trying to do in status quo, but is something that is absolutely not guaranteed to every individual worker, and also something that not every individual worker can have direct control upon. I will take PI from OO.
How do you think that things like maternity leave or even paternity leave are going to be pushed forwards and are going to make better for those people who need it, if those people who don't desperately need it are going to be saying, no, I don't need it, I'm going to get more pay for it?
Well, I'm not sure I understood the question correctly, but how it's going to make better for them is that not every single labor right is very frequently used by an individual worker. And the thing is, in status quo, all people have them by default. All people have this maternity or paternity leave by default, and they have this money in the hands of their bosses, not given to them, and probably and likely not being given to them at any point of their lives. But by allowing them to waive their labor rights, we're going to just simply have them have a direct impact on their financial situation. Not only that, but also probably them being more positive towards their companies in which they work for, which is an additional impact. So probably propose. Thank you.
Oh, that's even worse. Cool. Is everybody ready? Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Perfect. Then I am going to be starting in 3, 2, 1, go. So what we're going to be bringing to you in opening opposition is two things. First of all, that this is not a free choice for the individual to be doing this. And second of all, that this is never going to be going into a good results for anybody, either those people who choose it or those people who don't choose it or haven't chosen it yet. So first of all, what is important in terms of robotics, we have just heard from Prime Minister that these are not things that these workers use a lot. But if you look at the examples in the motions, we're literally talking here about days off, maternity leaves, hour limits, all of those different things. Those are the most basic things. Like hour limit is a thing that every worker uses daily. Days off is something that everybody uses in times of desperation, times of need, in a lot of situations. So we're talking about the most basic things about these situations. And this is very important to know why these are something that we should not be giving away. So talking about, first of all, why this is going to be having bad effects on both sides. First of all, starting with the individual. Why is it not a free choice? Because of all of the setting up that opening government did. These are people who are in a desperate situation, who desperately need this money within these situations. So those are people who are not actually going to be looking over the implication that this is having, the implication of what it means that you can't have days off within the situation, the implication that it has that you can't work longer within these within a day, and all of these different things. So we're here in a situation where you can't actually make a proper trade-off of these situations. And this is one of the big reasons of why we have limitations like this and why we have the obligations like this. And this is very important to note. And this is the point of lack of information and necessity about these situations. When you are a young person and a healthy person, you're saying like, oh no, I'm fine with less days off. I'm fine with having less sick leaves within these situations because I am healthy in the first place. But you do not know this, that you actually might need these until maybe a family member getting sick and you need those days off, or you get sick and therefore you need more days off in order to be doing all of these situations. So the first thing is that you have a lack of information, therefore you cannot actually make this a fair decision that the money is more important than all of those different things, because it is easy to say that, yeah, money is the one important thing, you need to pay for these things. Yes, we do see that these are situations of need, but this is something which is going to be pushed by your employer as something very obvious, something very easy in order to get more money within the situation, that you're unlikely to be looking in all of the alternatives that you're having this year. And because it is such a very obvious and very flashy situation, it is more likely that people are going to be going for these things because it is so easy to reach within these situations. So first of all, it's not going to be a free choice for them, and it's going to be making them not look in the alternatives because they're in a situation where they are going to be needing this. But second of all, this is also never going to be a good deal for them. Why? Because things like this are most likely going to be happening in jobs which are replaceable. Why? Because if it is a high skilled and high influence position, you're more likely to already get more money in the money that you are needed. Therefore, we're talking here about situations where you are one of thousands who can take the job. When there are a lot of applicants who could do the job within this situation, you're not specifically, you as an individual, valuable within the job in the first place. So you already have a very bad trading position. Therefore, it is unlikely that you're going to be having a good position in order to actually get all of the things that you need out of this situation. So your employer is unlikely to budge in a lot of different situations. Your employer also is unlikely to budge to let you get out of these situations, to say, okay, hey, can I change my contract in order to get my sick day, more days of leave now because my mother has gotten sick? You're unlikely to be able to be doing this because of the bad trading position that you have in comparison to your employer within the situation. So what this means is that you might get a little bit more money, but you're not going to get the money that is in any way going to be comparative to the amount of money that you do there. Like, obviously government can come up and say, well, now the government is going to be saying that they are going to be giving them more money, that it's going to be hard, and there's going to be a set rate, but then they're going to be contradicting themselves, and then they want to say the government is not going to give social security, but at the other hand the government is going to be doing these things and going to be setting a high rate. They need to choose one of those things. It's either or. So very likely these situations are going to be set up by the employer. Therefore, they are going to be bad for the employees within the situation. Therefore, it is not something that they even get a fair replacement for these things. So what we have to look here is that, first of all, they don't have free choice, but second of all, it's also going to be a battery. There's a reason of why we have these set limits, and the reason is not only that employers are wanting to abuse their employees if they can, but second of all, also because the employees need to be aware of the right that they have. POY from Closing Government, please.
If these people are in bad trading positions, in your world, they will get shitty insurance and shitty maternity leave. In both worlds, it will be a shitty bargain. Why can't we just allow them to pick the type of capital that best benefits them?
Because of number one, it's getting better in the current place, which is actually my second part of this. But first of all, these positions are not that shitty because we have traded out over decades and decades the requirement of this maternity leave. The maternity leave has gotten longer and longer, so it is currently at a decent place. And because it is at a decent enough place, it's not going to be given the value that it is given, because otherwise it would be too expensive. But second of all, the effect it has on others. Well, dying here. So this is very important because individuals' decisions do not just happen and do not just work here. Why? Like, number one, the pressure to be doing this. Things like the sick leave, hour limits, and maternity leave are something which are incredibly expensive for employees. Like, having to hire several people because you have an hour limit is something which is very expensive for your employer. So your employer is very likely to be making the best use of these situations. So they're most likely to be hiring those people who are going to be giving away their hourly limit because they have the possibility to get the best deal for themselves. And second of all of these extra things they have to give are incredibly expensive. Therefore, they are very likely to be choosing the people who are going to be doing this. What is the impact of this? Number one, it is going to make it much harder for people who are dependent on these things in order to actually get into job. So people who have chronic illnesses and therefore miss work already have a very hard time getting a job. But now it's getting even harder because they can't take this one thing which is making it cheaper for the employee. Therefore, we are making it even harder for the more vulnerable people to get a job in the second place. But then, most importantly, what actually matters is that in the long run, we make minimum wage livable. We make it possible that you don't need to trade off your things. How do we get people to not having to trade off of all of their basic rights? It is by pressuring and by consistent pressuring for a lot of people. And this is what my POY was and what my partner is going to be talking about a way. We need to find a way in which we can make it livable for people and make it do this. But we can only be doing this through the options of offering alternatives and offering the need. We need to show that maternity leave and paternity leave are a necessity and not just something that some people might want to be having in this. We cannot trade trade off this possibility and the bargaining chip in the long run for a short-term situation by just taking away the responsibility of the government, putting it on the employment. Therefore, we beg you to oppose.
May I start? Can people hear me? Can I start?
Yeah, we can.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're audible.
Okay, sorry.
You can start, yeah.
POI is in the chat. I'm checking this. Don't unmute yourself by any circumstances. Cool. 3, 2, 1. Opening opposition start their speech by saying that's not free choice and that's limited free choice. They never actually explain how free choice exists in the first place in the job market, because as far as I know, when you have a capitalist, when you need to pay your bills, when you need to make money or some kind of capital to have something to eat, to have something to place to live, this is already massive limitation of your free choice. So it's unclear for me how this principle exists in the vacuum, not in the context of the particular debate. But second of all, I think their rebuttal is uncomparative, right? The desperation of these people, their need to get money, their need to survive exists on both sides of the house. They need to deal with the alternative. The alternative is as follows. If you still need money to achieve like educational, basic needs, to pay your rent, to invest in something, you need to find alternative source of income, which usually means that you need to take extra tasks and extra jobs. So you're finishing one job at 4 p.m. and you are going to get home and like making some kind of extra things to get extra $300 or $400, that you're going to the bank and you are taking the credit, which are a long-term bond, and you don't know what will happen in the next 5 years, but you might be screwed, that you are going to the black market and you are trying to get any additional things. Comparatively, you also need to, you gave people some kind of feeling that they can change something, that they have some kind of decision-making process, that they can decide what they prioritize, what they value, and they don't need to wait on someone keeping their potential money on some kind of place where you might not never use. Second of all, about the lack of information, I think you are the best source of information for yourself. Your lack of pleasure and happiness because you can't afford this. Your feeling of disappointment when you are coming back home and your children are like, hey, why you can't buy me like new clothes to the school, or like why I don't have get this books, or like why can't I get to this extra English classes. Your lack of feeling that you are seeing the sense of the job, right? Because you are seeing in your contract that you might get maternity or paternity leave, but you are single and you don't want to have a child because you think that having children, it's immoral, or like you didn't see the place for that in your life. Your frustration of the money when you are seeing how rich is your company and they can't share with you, that you are seeing that you are not using these benefits at all. I think this is a lot of information comparatively, and it's coming from your individual perspective. You're not someone who is privileged like a state compared to you. It's not someone who is your employer or some kind of people in labor union, which they are just sometimes fighting as the represent of the bigger group and not looking for your particular single interest. So I don't think that the lack of information stands in this debate. Then they said that will be never a good deal. I agree with POI from Closing Government. This is completely uncomparative, especially when you have a bad trading position. But there is some limitations which company will never go step ahead to not ruin their brands. In terms of safety regulations, in terms of insurance, they know that any like a large issue when you will face as an accident, or if you hurt your health or if you will like create them bad branding, they will need to deal with that for a long period of time. Therefore, they will try to allocate some system or find some check and balance to didn't pay you that much as you demand, but still to cover their own safety and requires like in terms of this contract. So I think there is capacity to create the balance because companies are not willing to risk. But second of all, companies need works to hand, right? Like even if some kind of automatization will happen in the future, they still will need people in other position, and also there will be pressure from the government and from the society to find some kind of task and also to make people feeling productive. And I think there is a lot of branches when this case doesn't stand. And responding finally to the POI given to my partner, maternity and paternity leave. You can make the cost of the benefits. If you accidentally get pregnant later, you maybe have your spouse which don't have a work. Maybe you are close with your family and you want your grandma to help you raising your child. But also, you need to find any solution, right? So probably if you gave up this maternity leave, maybe earlier you will be capable to accommodate this money to like invest in some kind of future, to create some kind of savings for retirement, to invest in your child like fund. I think there is a lot of information and increasing awareness which you can get. So now I think the very important like piece of framing why I think we are beating opening opposition. Reality in job market, it's horrible for majority of people. And if you don't believe that people live from first to first, from 10 to 10 when they have their payday, look what's coronavirus and like pandemic did. When a lot of people lost their jobs, when people have massive mental health issues because they lost their income from a month or 2 months because of the lockdown, because inability to go to work. That shows that a lot of people, and majority in this debate, for people for which $1,000 or $500 make the difference per month or even per year sometimes, it's crucial in this debate. Companies already dictate people how much they will be paying them, how much they deserve, but also have disproportionate power over that. The solution which opposition should defend in this debate is, we will make structural changes. We will wait for advocacy. We will have a lot of labor unions. We have a lot of like leftist politicians which defend like rights of these people. All of the solutions which stand on side opposition are the long term in terms of you are relying on some kind of actions to being done and some kind of policy to being passed. Comparative is as follows. You gave the individual feeling that they have capacity, they don't need to rely on some scholarship, they don't need to rely on extra payment from the government. Their decision can make the difference and increase their perception and the capacity how they are going every day to this work, that they don't feel that they are robbed from some kind of capital which they deserve, which should be delivered to them. So I think for a lot of people who didn't see this sense in maternity leave, for people who didn't value their free time, who didn't want to come back home because they don't have family, but they want to overwork, they want to work for themselves because they seeing value in this work, because they're seeing that they can dedicate something more. We believe that these people already being aware of the struggles around them, they already live their life, they know what are their options, and they know how to make this trade-off. Comparatively, on both sides of the house, they have some sort of outside information on the same level. On our side of the house, you gave their personal opinion and their personal value of judgment of their free time, of their work, of their labor, and gave them some more agency and increase that choice. I want to also bring back what my partner said. This debate is about the individual getting this right. We don't need to prove that 100% of people will do that. We don't need to prove that like companies will be massively changing that shift. We want to give people ability in the long term to seeing that there is a possibility to pick more money instead of some rights which didn't belong to you because you are not identifying with the group of people which potentially might deserve this right. Therefore, we are proud to propose.
I would like to call the deputy leader of opposition on the floor.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, give me a second. Okay, so I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Dear panel, our rebuttals will be as follows. For example, what our stance is that we're not really speaking about people who can make it, because we believe that this is a minority And at first, like even for these people, and I would love to take the government to their best case scenario, where like, okay, it's a choice of freedom. Yes, but as a worker right now, will I be the same worker after 30 years or 40 years? When I am giving up on my rights right now, at this moment, as a young person who can work for extra hours for a small pay, and because I'm motivated to get more money and stuff, it can happen now, but it will put me at risk on the long term. So, for example, when I'm like, uh, now I am single, I am strong, I have enough time, so I would be more open to work extra. But when in the future, and we don't know how things are going to change, I don't know what's going to happen. And in the case that I give up on this right, this will draw back not only on me, but also on the people. Well, like let me explain one. Why on those people by themselves is drawing bad? Because these people are going to be more at the mercy of the company, because their basic rights, yes, some security rights will be there, but that's so basic, but they're gonna end up losing as well more rights that they could have won if they stuck to getting like the normal classical way of work. But how it will result on others is like what I'm gonna explain in our case. So we have like, I'll be having three main points. First, that like these people are mostly desperate need, like for the money that they are that's why they accept it. So for example, I cannot see a doctor again or an engineer giving up on their rights in order to get like a slightly um, extra payment, because they already have like extra payment. And we know that in these cases, for example, when the company asks for extra work, the remunerations coming from this are way bigger than when I guess like giving up on your right when you enter immediately, because the company needs the skill of these professionals and stuff. So we can take this out of the debate for right now. So what we have left to debate on is people who are like low skilled workers, right? People who can be replaced easily. So for example, when I accept this as a 20 years old, I will be working for like what, 10 years, 15 years, but the company will in the future will easily get rid of me and bring another person stronger and more willing to work harder and more effective because of the age difference and stuff. Because it's kind of logical that a fifth in low skill work, someone who is 20 years is more effective and more productive than someone who is like 55 years old. So the second point that on this first idea is that these people who are like easily disposable for, are gonna close the door for other, for example, in student cities and stuff. We know that a lot of students go to work part-time jobs, and when you are having like, for example, in a coffee shop, someone who works 8 hours, but they want to work extra, you will give them a low payment, but that's also meaning that you're closing the door for these students, for example, that want to work and have extra payment so they can keep up with their studies and stuff. The third point before I take the PI was that, well, you know, a lot of people get sick with the time, like get families in the time and stuff. But these people, the other people will always be second in the in terms of the workplace, because no one will be giving them the right to take their maternity leave and stuff. Therefore, with time, these basic rights that we are asking for and that generations before us were asking for will fade as being like something extra and not something necessary for the coming generations. We'll take PI from CG.
We allow younger people to trade off benefits to their older selves, for example, drinking alcohol, smoking. What is the difference with this and this model?
Sorry, your voice got. Can you write it? So as far as I understand, you are telling me that like, yes, we're letting the youngsters choose, but what we're telling you as the opposition today is that, well, they can choose at a moment by like some young age motivation, but these people are growing old as well. And we know that like in the status quo, it is hard to change from a job to a job, as the government already mentioned that like people are losing their jobs on the coronavirus and stuff. But what we are but like, isn't it illogical to ask someone like, okay, now I'm giving up on my rights, but I will take them later? We know that like, as far as the motion is concerned, when I'm giving up on my rights now, it means that I'm giving up on the same rights after 20 years old. So after 20 years, so it will be the same. And but my capability and the effectiveness as a worker will be decreasing and deteriorating. So So therefore, I will be easily gotten rid of, and I will lose my remunerations when I get like when I stop working at the age of 60, etc., etc. The second point that I want to mention was like the long-term effect on this and the relationship with the political movement and the capital and the like. And the activist movement and how this backlashes on them. So we know that like the basic workers or like the low skill workers have been having a long-term fight with the governments and the capital system in order to get these basic rights that allow them in order to grow within the social hierarchy and allow them to have a more stable life. So basically when I am when I am as a person allowing like my institution to force me to work other things, I will be immediately telling the others, I will be immediately taking on the rights of others that have been asking for the maternity right, or the people who have been asking for like the parental leave, or people who are sick but are able to work, because we think that the majority of people in their life development as a human, not a robot, they will get less effective by time and will get less productive and will lose the ability to work for longer hours. So this, if this motion passes, we're only we will be only focusing on, we will give more power to the capital system, we will give more power to the institution, because we know that for one, this motion is mainly focused on the low skilled workers that are basically easy to be replaced. And second is that we will be working with these workers for the period that they are most effective and stuff, and and after that we will just get rid of them. For all of these reasons, we are proud to.
Can you all hear me? Can I just check that I'm audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay, so can I start?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. All right, I will start in 3, 2, 1. So closing government is going to enter this debate in 3 ways that we think will prove comprehensively that this is a good choice that we should allow people. First, I'm going to explain why in principle we think this is something the states ought to delegate in terms of rights. Second, I'll talk about why we think in the counterfactual world where they are forced to work for lesser wages, in fact, these people are likely to opt into worse alternatives. I think opening government kind of suggests this by talking about the black market, but I want to talk about what this means for people's overall development. And thirdly, I'll talk about why once we make insurance, maternity leave, and the packages that are currently being provided to by companies, once we make them optional, we think we're more likely to have a world in which these insurance agencies are likely to be a lot more competitive because they want to attract people to take up their policy packages, because it's not just something that is mandatory that people are forced to take in the status quo. Cool. Firstly, let's talk about the principal justification. The first thing I want to talk about is how much money will we get for doing our model? Because opening opposition suggests that, look, because of our bad trading position, the amount of money that we're going to get in trading off our maternity leave or trading off our insurance is likely to be very little. And I asked in a POI if it's very little, it will be a commensurate harm in both worlds. Her response was, well, things are getting better right now. And first of all, if things are getting better in terms of our bargaining ability with regards to maternity leave, for example, if we are getting better lobbying rights, that means we will also be able to have the same capacity to create great amount of money if you can say that we have the capacity to make companies opt into maternity leave. So we think there is capital in the market, and we think that means that we get some quite good quantity, and obviously it will be commensurate to the risk. So for example, insurance on like injuries in the workplace, if you trade off that, you're likely to get greater money than, for example, an insurance for a fire, for example, which is less likely. Those kind of things exist, which means that we get some amount of money. Now, the principal question in this debate is, first of all, is this a free choice? I think opening government only half answers this question when they say that capitalism is coercive, therefore these people don't have a choice in the status quo. That's not the point in this particular principal clash. The point is, however, that the freedom to make a choice can only be done once you allow people to take up their individual lived experiences and make subjective calls about them. The state doesn't know what it means to be a poor person, and every poor person lives with different intersections of disprivilege, which means that some of them might require health insurance because they are more likely to develop a disease. Some of them might opt into that. Another group of people might not opt into that because they think that there are more greater benefits. For example, if they get paid more, they can make an insurance, they can make a down payment on a house, for example, and that means that they have better capital in the future. People can trade off different versions of their life. And you don't have to be in a position of full information or be the young person who thinks about everything in order to make their decision. We allow people, for example, to write wills so early into their life, even if you don't know what's happening in the future. We allow poor people to make very, very high investment in the short term, for example, taking up a mortgage, taking up a loan, even if they don't know what in the future they're going to benefit from. And the reason I asked the POI is because if I smoke or drink right now as a young person, because I think it creates benefits for me, in the future, I will obviously have cancer. I will obviously die faster. We allow people to make these decisions and trade-offs because the TLDR of all of it is genuinely that the state shouldn't prescribe a certain way to assess risk and a certain way in which to weigh up things. Obviously, people can get it wrong sometimes. Yeah, I could trade off health insurance for additional payment and eventually I get cancer. That's fine. People consented to this harm. In the worst case, in the best case, we enable greater flexibility. If capitalism is coercive, if our model is coercive, we think giving them greater options to pick between the world that is coercive is a world in which that free choice is likely to be maximized. Therefore, we think in principle, this is something that we ought to support and we ought to privilege. It doesn't matter if the information is not like super accessible. It doesn't matter if you are a young person deciding is those are not considerations the state ever cares about. We shouldn't start caring about them now. Second is what the counterfactual looks like. This is where opening opposition really loses the boat because their argument was just, we are going to ensure that we are pressuring governments better in order to ensure that there is equal rights and people get more and more maternity leave, for example. The first thing I want to say is, in fact, that can happen in both worlds. There's no reason for why we can't pressure governments in our world, even if it is optional. And the reason this is true is because obviously if it's something that is optional and some people are taking maternity leave and some are not, it is in fact a greater rallying cry because now obviously the insurance and the schemes, national schemes that do sell to companies things like packages for maternity leave and benefits, they can't just rely on the fact that they are currently mandatory and therefore have policies that are not very competitive. In fact, quite likely screw over these people greater because they're trading a lot of money for clauses that are not very well written. For example, a vast number of these people are screwed over. We think in our world is likely to be better off the bargaining power once it becomes something that companies have to work for and likely to compete against each other and be better. The third thing we want to talk about in the closing government is what we think the counterfactual looks like for these individuals. Now, opening government says that these people are likely to opt into the black market. We think that's half the picture. The other half of the picture is oftentimes when people are strapped for money, they get involved in informal economies where it is very hard to regulate. So whilst it is true that in our world we're trading off these standards, if you are working in a company that even has maternity leave, that even has some of these standards, it's probably a large company, it's probably a very rich MNC, because a lot of the smaller companies in informal economies in like developing countries like Bangladesh don't have the capacity to have this kind of standards. So if you are trading off these rights, it is probably true that you are in a very good position in terms of this company. It's probably likely to have some standards. Now, in the world in which you can't ask for additional money from this particular company, it is true that you are likely to be involved in informal economy that causes harm to both you in the short term, but also makes you more likely to be coerced. That is things like appealing to loan sharks, for example. That is things like in being involved in like organized crime. And a bunch of people in the developing world are obviously trapped by this because they don't have cash and they don't see the benefits of maternity leave, for example, in the future. For those reasons, they are likely to be harmed. I'll take a POI from opening opposition.
We accept that some people might have less money in our world, but those are just like small people in a better place. We accept your trade-off, but given that we have proven to you that allowing this will take away the job chances and possibilities of people who are really dependent on these rights, how do we answer to that? Like knowing that they are getting more impacted.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the first thing is you can accept the trade-off, but if you haven't justified why your trade-off is worth the comparison, you're not winning the debate. And the second thing is I've explained to you why we think the trade-off for this individual is likely that this individual is having access to greater flexibility in terms of how their capital, basically the mode in which that capital is used by this individual is better able to do this. That is, and I explained also why we're better able to get things like collective bargaining power. Why, even if it's true that it becomes optional, there's no reason for why it being mandatory means you're more likely to bargain for it. And so because of these three comparisons, we think closing government wins the debate. But I want to lastly do some framing against opening government, because opening government doesn't actually explain to you what the harm is of these people accessing alternative black markets. We were a team that gave you the mechanisms for this. Second, in terms of principle, we were the ones that explained why the principle is something that the state should allow in terms of our ability to assess risk, the younger self making decisions for the older self in terms of freedom of choice. And lastly, we gave you reasons for why this creates a competitive nature in which companies now have to attract the customers to buy their products. As a result of this competitive nature, it is likely true that these companies are likely to create better insurance schemes than a world in which it was mandatory. And so for all these reasons, we think this comprehensively proves that this is a policy state should allow. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible?
I want to call the second speaker, the government we on the floor.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, just a couple seconds. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, dear panel, in my speech, I'm going to explain. I'm going to compare our table with first the opening opposition, then closing opposition, then opening government. So, basically, both government benches tell us that look on our side of the house, there are no free choice. Also, they tell us that conditions in our side of the house will get worse, but I really don't get any characterizations of why their lives will get worse, etc. So why? What reasons they provide us of explaining free choice? They tell us, look, we're in the desperate situation, and also those people will not look at the implications because they have to feed their child, etc. So look, what is the situation in status quo? Look, in status quo, you are already live in a poor quality of life. You're already working and your rights is not protected well because look, trade unions in order to be part of labor unions or trade unions, you already have to have some capital to invest in these unions in order to these unions to protect you. So secondly, you already work more hours in order to get more money because you need it, because you don't have any alternatives, because you're poor and you're like, as opposition describe themselves, you're like low skilled worker. So on their side of the house, your rights is already not being protected at the good extent. And secondly, what is the difference between our world and their world? And first question, why they will look at the implication and why is there comparisons in their head and weighing what is the better for them? My partner already told you importance of this right, and I will tell you about what is the comparison and why it will be rational. So look, on their side of the for example, I am as a low skilled worker know that either I work a lot of hours and get a low salary, and also I don't have already some labor unions benefits or etc. And I have to feed my child because this is the most important priority in status quo, for example, because I need to eat something, or I will lose these rights in the expense of money, and I will have some money to eat, to feed myself, to invest in my child's education, and then my child will have the better future. Because look, education is important as well, and poor people don't have access to this education. On our side of the house, at least you will be able to send your child at school, which is basic right for all of us. So you will not work a lot of hours because you already have money on our side of the house, at least some money. So it is, they can assess the implications. Secondly, in both sides of the house, my partner already showed you that insurance companies or etc. don't wanna lose their clients, and therefore they will increase the they will make better the conditions for those poor people in order to save clients. But moreover, impactization of that, look, employers, they may want to get all of the benefits from their workers, and therefore they in their side of the house they can exploit them because they don't have access to some labor unions. And even if they have in most of the developing countries, there are no access to high qualified labor unions and etc. And in our side of the house, employers don't want to lose don't want to pay their workers more money. So that is to say, they don't want to pay for them lots of money. They want them to work like harder and more. So on our side of the house, employers will at least to make better some conditions for their work conditions, because for them it is easier to make some conditions better, to increase salary to a little amount, because on the alternatives, these people have alternatives to sell their rights and to increase their salary to some extent, for sure. So they will incentivize to keep them their conditions. So moreover, opposition tells themselves that it is not as shitty as opening government describes. So if it's not shitty, then they will moreover have this rational decision in their mind, because you can choose rational because it's not that bad. But moreover, they don't I don't really get from their side of the house, even if they prove that it is not rational decisions, like let's take them at their best, why this free choice or rational decisions is more important than your basic needs in our side of the house. So certainly, CEO tells about consent more, but they also give us some things like you won't be able to take the right back. So I think it's clear that the criteria for the contract, for the consent, that firstly, you're rationally thinking. We already prove you that we're rational thinking. Secondly, you are able to take your consent back. But even if you're not be able from their framing, I think in our side of the house you will think more rationally, because you will think twice before getting in this contract. So also, all of their cases are standing on the premise that their rights are already being protected in status quo. It is not because we're living in the capitalistic world and it's all about money, etc. So why do we win opening government? Because they talk about really probable cases that you might not use this right, you might not want children, or lots of people lost their jobs, which is like just okay, my time is up, and I think it is clear why we win.
Am I audible clearly?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. So may I start then? In 3, 2, 1. So the main clash that was presented on the opening tables, basically on the opening tables, it was necessary to answer 2 questions. First is why choice even exists, like why do those employees have a choice to wage their rights? And second, if that choice will be coercive or not. Coming to the first question, so opening government states that in the status quo, like the system is built so that people already do not have enough choice to they were deprived of that due to the economical and political systems on which opening opposition really doesn't respond in a full manner, whereas Saumya, the member of opposition, has clearly explained that in fact, people do have conscience, have conscience, and therefore they have mm, the capabilities to compare things, and therefore they have choice. As an example, she presented the existence of trade unions that already prove you the fact that people can make some choices that are better for their for their rights and for their situations. Second, on the point of which choice will be coercive, what do we hear from the opening opposition is that mostly uh, uh, workers are they are in an unfair situation, in an unfair trading position uh, uh, where companies have a lot more information and therefore they could manipulate it. And on our side of the house, we explain you that even if the workers have full information about the implications and the outcomes of their choices, we recognize that mm, waging those rights only works for short-term flexibility, due to the biases of the workers that see the urgency of uh, their problem right now. And secondly, we state that in fact, even if the workers are the workers have full information about their choices and their implications, we state that it is inefficient for the companies themselves, and therefore they will try to coerce their workers into waging their rights. This response is more independent, uh, like it is more general and independent from individual cases. Why? Because we cannot never guarantee whether whether a certain worker has a full information about the case or not, and therefore we prove it on the fundamental principle basis, and prove it from the perspective of the companies that have an asymmetry imbalance from the other side. And that is how we are uh, different from our openings. So coming to the closing governments, what closing governments basically state, their main principle is that we currently allow people to take, for example, loans, even if those loans are unbeneficial for the people in future. And the existence of that right, that uh, government shouldn't prescribe people what to do and what not to do, but uh, our response was that a certain person uh, may be prone to biases to the they may over exaggerate the uh, urgency of the current situation of the short-term priorities, and therefore, and at the same time, they can never predict the future. They can never predict whether the right they are waging will be useful in the future, and therefore uh, like what I was saying, and therefore it is crucial. Uh, it is crucial to limit the workers in that sense. The same way, basically, the government limits their people, I don't know, onto going to dangerous sites because they can harm their health, and it is unbeneficial for the government themselves, or I don't know, they sometimes limit the ability of a person, for example, to participate in uh, extreme sports if their health conditions do not fit to it. And similarly to that, POI from OGS.
Your comparative is that the neither state and like societal norms, or neither your employer decide what you should value and what are your benefits. On our side of the house, you gave people ability to decide what they need on a daily basis. Why your competing analysis is better than ours, and all of the reasoning which we gave you in the beginning of this.
Mm. So our analysis was that the characterization of that exact problem, like in which two sides have an obvious asymmetry, like it is better because okay, this time, sorry for that. Thank you.
So the verdict, my call is closing government comes the first, second is opening opposition, third is opening government, fourth is the closing opposition. So now let me tell you what is the like, quality of debate. So like the burden on both the sides. I think the burden of all the houses were like to state to give the better quality and better work environment to all the employers. And I think the closing government stated it clearly, and then the opening opposition, then the opening government, then the closing opposition. The closing government, they clearly, I think they clearly stated how how the
Sorry, I can hear you. Is it my problem?
You're not audible. Hello.
am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, I'm starting again. So the closing government, they clearly stated like the how the additional pay is more beneficial than a labor rights for the employer and as well as the employee. They stated that a person need additional pay more than the labor rights because they clearly stated that we live in a capitalistic society, and in capitalistic society what we need more is a additional pay. And they clearly stated that in the capitalist society, using the additional pay, we can we can use it in a more beneficial way, we can use it in other way. And this clearly stated the people who are more productive, who are willing to work more, they can clearly put their claim and they clearly can earn more and use that money. They can clearly bid their labor rights, they clearly for the additional pay. They clearly stated that. And the opening opposition, I think they came up with some questions, very good questions. Like they came up with certain points, what was like it may affect the productivity. I think the opening opposition, they came up with a point like the young people, they are more productive, and the older people, as you get, you become less and less productive. So what would happen is that the company would replace the older employee with the younger employee, to who is the closing government. They clearly explained that the productivity lies with the individual person. Sometimes the older people may be more productive than the closing people may be less productive. So they clearly stated like how the young people, they can be careless, they can be reckless, and older people can be more productive. So that got way down. And they came up, and another thing they came up, like they clearly stated how the people who are more productive, they can pay their labor rights in terms of additional pay. And I think the opening government, they came up with certain points that they came up with certain points like that people who are struggling financially, they need more money to feed their children. It will decrease the level of their suffering. And another thing was like they need like they came up with certain points like frustration. And people, like it will lead to frustration, like people who don't have money, they have come up with frustration. But what I feel like that these points are not properly fleshed out. It's like sort of 14 point sort of thing. So if it will be properly fleshed out, or it will be properly to debate, that would be more beneficial. Like they came up with some points like people need financial needs, and they came up with the points like that. People who are struggling to have support their family would be benefited from additional pay. But I think the closing government, they came up with more better ideas than the opening government, because they clearly stated in capitalist society, and they were a capitalist society and we need money. And I think the closing opening government in both the sides, they didn't cater to the questions raised by the opening opposition about the productivity, or how the elder people would be replaced by the younger people, to who is the closing government clearly catered to. And when it comes to closing opposition, I think they came up with certain points, but like uh, like uh, but it was not in adherence to the other house. Like they came up with the points like the rights may affect the future. They come up with the working conditions, that if there be no labor rights, it would affect the working conditions. And educate, they came up with certain ideas the company who need like trade unions and all, they are fighting for these all things, like there will be no free choice and all these things. But what I felt like that, again, like the close opening comment, this will be more fleshed out, their points will be more fleshed out, and this will be more weighed upon. So they are all the points that they asked or raised were not weighed upon in debate. So my call was closing government, opening opposition, opening government, and closing opposition. Yeah. So with this, I want to raise.